Our world is chaotic. I take a look at the news or scroll through my phone for a few minutes, and I know things are not good. Sometimes I'm so overwhelmed by the horrible injustices, losses, and devastations that I really want to be the ostrich with its head in the sand. Sometimes that feels like the only way to stem the tide of fear. But I also know that it is love, not fear, that will empower us to save ourselves. Our inherent worthiness and true interconnectedness are our superpowers. And I don't know that all of us realize this or remember this. We're asleep to this truth, going through life disconnected from our own inherent worth and dignity. And we're so deep asleep that we're unable to hear the sacred voice that speaks from above and from within, telling us that we are the beloved. I've been reading some works by Dutch Catholic priest Henry Nouwen. Most recently, I've read his book, Life of the Beloved. And in that book, he says that being beloved is the core truth of our existence, that we're ultimately loved long before our parents, teachers, spouses, children, and friends ever loved or wounded us. That's the truth of our lives. Being a priest, Nouwen defines being the beloved in Christocentric terms. He writes that he first learned the word beloved from the story of the baptism of Jesus of Nazareth. No sooner had Jesus come up out of the water when he saw that the heavens torn apart and the Spirit like a dove descending on him. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my son, the beloved, my favor rests on you." Nouwen believes that we have been seen by God from all eternity and seen as unique, special, precious beings. Long before we were born and became a part of this history, we existed in God's heart. But believing in God isn't required to see ourselves and others as precious, as of infinite beauty and as of eternal value. We really just need to look to our first principle. As UU Minister Reverend Dr. Rebecca Ann Parker writes, we as Unitarian Universalists affirm the inherent worth and dignity of each person as a given of faith, an unshakable conviction, calling us to self-respect and respect for others. But upholding this first principle of ours isn't always easy. We have the voices of self-rejection, which Nouwen calls the greatest enemy of the spiritual. And I'm sure many of you can relate when I say that for a large part of my life, those voices of self-rejection never seemed to shut up, even though I desperately wanted them to. My internal voice was a great mimic, perfectly reciting all of the ways society and many of those around me told me or showed me I wasn't good enough. On top of that, my internal voice was also a great improviser and just made stuff up about why I was anything but beloved. This negative self-talk creates a trap of self-rejection. Nouwen has a lot to say on this, and I'd like to share some of that with you. He writes the following: these negative voices are so loud and so persistent that it is easy to believe them. That's the great trap. It is the trap of self-rejection. Over the years, I have come to realize that the greatest trap in our life is not success, popularity, or power, but self-rejection. Success, popularity, and power can indeed present a great temptation, but their seductive quality often comes from the way they are part of a much larger temptation to self-rejection. When we have come to believe in the voices that call us worthless and unlovable, then success, popularity, and power are easily perceived as attractive solutions. The real trap, however, is self-rejection. I am constantly surprised at how quickly I give into this temptation. As soon as someone accuses me or criticizes me, as soon as I am rejected, left alone, or abandoned, I find myself thinking, well, that proves once again that I am a nobody. Instead of taking a critical look at the circumstances or trying to bring my own and others, or trying to understand my own and others' limitations, I tend to blame myself, not just for what I did, but for who I am. My dark side says I am no good. I deserve to be pushed aside, forgotten, rejected, and abandoned. Not seldom, self-rejection is simply seen as the neurotic expression of an insecure person. But neurosis is often the psychic manifestation of a much deeper human darkness, the darkness of not feeling truly welcome in human existence. Self-rejection is the greatest enemy of the spiritual life because it contradicts the sacred voice that calls us the beloved. Maybe you think that you are more tempted by arrogance than self-rejection, but isn't arrogance in fact the other side of self-rejection? Isn't arrogance putting yourself on a pedestal to avoid being seen as you see yourself? Isn't arrogance in the final analysis just another way of dealing with the feelings of worthlessness? Both self-rejection and arrogance pull us out of the common reality of existence and make a gentle community of people extremely difficult, if not impossible, to attain. I know too well that beneath my arrogance there lies much self-doubt, just as there is a great amount of pride hidden in my self-rejection. Whether I am inflated or deflated, I lose touch with my truth and distort my vision of reality. So I believe that when we wake up to our own holiness, when we wholeheartedly and fully claim being beloved as our core truth, it becomes almost impossible not to recognize that the same is true of those living this earthly experience with us. And this can change everything. When we are awake to both our own fundamental worth and the fundamental worth of each other, it becomes easier to see and acknowledge that there is something essential in each of us that connects us to each other. Some of us use the word God for this mystery and many don't, but we, as you use, recognize this connection is of ultimate value. As Unitarian Universalist minister Kenneth Patton has written in The Sense of Life, we are all things, all person, fool and famished, good and bewildered, sly and honest, frightened and less frightened, killer and slain, the rapturer and the enraptured, the young and the old. We are all things, tree and flower, moss and grass, mammal and reptile, bird and insect. Our fellowship reaching through the earth, we are river and stone, sand and mountain, fire and wind, comet and star. Recognizing this interdependence means we must take into account that our actions have far-reaching effects. Affirming our interconnectedness and our inherent worth comes with responsibilities. It calls us to support the well-being and thriving of every human being. This means we must recognize and actively work to change the unjust social systems that oppress human thriving. We must wake up to the reality that systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, and the war economy hurt all of us, not just a small segment of our society. We have to wake up to the world as it is. We are submerged in social systems that collectively cause harm. Only when we wipe the sand away from our eyes and see these ugly systems with clarity can we fully understand their structures and how we can dismantle them within ourselves, within our church walls, and out in our communities. We must keep unmasking the world about us for what it is: manipulative, controlling, power hungry, and in the long run, destructive. Remaining asleep to our own divinity, our own belovedness, not truly believing at the core in our own inherent worth and interconnectedness makes us an insecure, fearful, self-deprecating people, a people that can more easily be used and manipulated by the power surrounding us. And make no mistake, those in power deliberately tell us lies about who we are to keep us divided. Because those in power know that, in the words of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the dispossessed of this nation, the poor, both white and Negro, live in a cruelly unjust society. The only real revolutionary, people say, is a man who has nothing to lose. There are millions of poor people in this country who have very little or even nothing to lose. If they can be helped to take action together, they will do so with a freedom and a power that will be a new and unsettling force in our complacent national life. Only by awakening and staying awake to all there is, the divine, the mundane, the joyful, the sorrowful, the freeing and the oppressive, the chaotic and, well, the little less chaotic, can we really begin to create a world where everyone thrives and everyone has a right to live. A world that has never been, yet must be. Amen. May it be so.